Ladies and gentlemen, my friend from across the water, Gerald Kells. Gerald, welcome to Poets of the East, my friend.
Hi, yeah, again.
Yep, yep. So, Gerald, I really have always enjoyed your wit, your wry sense of humor. You use, I would say, a jeweler's saw and a very delicate instrument in your satire. Always very subtle, very much in good taste. Uh, and as one that wanders from time to time across the gentle side of sarcasm, when did you start writing?
I started writing poetry when I was about 12, 13. And the main reason for doing it, I used to go to a Christian youth club. But I'm doing a show next month all about my Christian youth club and Christian rock music and how I got into peace and justice as a result of that, strange enough.
Well,
Um,
once
and
upon a time, they were very closely related.
yeah, once upon a time, yeah, and still are. I began writing because we would go round to little churches with this preacher who was a painter and decorator and charismatic preacher thrown
Mm.
out of the exclusive brethren and set up this youth club. And one of the things was that we were really into the Little Flock hymn book, which was really dense hymns, plus Christian rock. So my poetry was kind of a mixture of those. And the poem, can I read you this poem? Because
Please, please.
it's in my book, 51 Poems, which people can buy. Yeah, here it is, Counting the Days. It's called Counting the Days. And they're good in my book 'cause they're all in alphabetical order, so they're not far to find. So I was sitting in this Vietnamese restaurant a little while back, and there were a couple who were having this conversation. He was telling her about uh, the 666 and the Antichrist and everything, and he was explaining it all to her. And I was reminded of J and Darby, who the exclusive brethren guy who was behind all this stuff that they now spout. And I wrote this poem about it. It's called Counting the Days. They're talking about Revelation on the next table. He brings up beasts and sacrifice and lamb that explains the intricacies of an exposition that goes back to J.N. Darby and my teenage years. He doesn't know who J.N. Darby is, nor does she. Yet, out of ancient texts, out of antique words, their meaning lost in the politics of ancient Rome and the persecution of a sect of fanatics in catacombs and caves, he brings forth dreams, prophecies of a world that's yet to come, turned violent and wild, terrifying yet free. His vision spins outward like a Catherine wheel, demons cast down as new gods are drawn in. I'm waiting for my black bean soup. They're waiting for the end of days. And that was yeah, so that was where I started, and I was writing these poems a lot about that, and I went off poetry later just because I didn't think you could do anything with it, and I was trying to write plays and all kinds of things. And in fact, next year, two of my plays are going to be put on in in the Black Country and in Birmingham in the UK, which have been revived from a long time ago. But that's where it started all out, and a bit of that is still in my poems. You'll find the idea of justice, the idea of peace, all that has come through as a result of it, as well as some stupidity as well.
Well, a little humility goes a long way. Um, when you were a young man, were there what authors caught your attention? What authors did you maybe think to emulate? Were you inspired by any in particular that stick out in your mind?
Um, well, apart from the dense theology that I was reading, and yeah, it was pretty dense stuff. Um, at school, I read Lord of the Flies, which had a huge kind of influence. And as I got into poetry more, Seamus Heaney was someone I absolutely adored. Um, and also there was some kind of stand-up type poets within that kind of Christian world that I wrote. Let me read you. I've got another poem here actually, and this
Sure,
one's
sure,
in the
go ahead.
this one's in the chum. It's in a book called New Christian Poetry, and it was written a very long time ago. But it's a poem that I still love. It's a proper sonnet,
Mm.
so I can do it. It was called Resurrection. Um, and I'll tell you, this goes back to, just looking it up, 1990. When the wind strikes the clock in the hall, when the rain snipes the latch on the window, when the snow covers catch and handle and road and path and grass and Mrs. White's car, when the night stains the TV aerials and trees with its fingertips, when the parched frost wins its way down flimsy icicles and finds you looking up into the blue winter, wearing only a cold that never ends. When winter's naked sword is closed with guile, the weather its persistent cutting edge. Remember, love is often cold and wan until it finds two voices for its song. So winter's notes will usher in the spring.
Lovely,
And that,
lovely.
yeah, that was published in New Christian Poetry back in 1990. Um, and I was kind of moving on then. So, I was starting to do more plays. I was getting more interested in the environment, in justice. Um, and I was writing absurd plays. So, as you know, there's a bit of absurdity comes up in my poems.
Which of the absurdist playwrights really struck you?
Oh, I love Ionescu.
That was
Um,
my first guess, yeah.
I love Beckett. We went to see a wonderful version of the Rhinoceros by Ionesco, that done by kids. We didn't know it was kids, but the kids, when they got the rhinoceros masks on, when they came rhinoceros, they climbed over the seats
Oh,
through
how
the
nice.
audience, and it was
Wow.
just amazing. I've never forgotten it. And at the Irish plays, because of the Irish background through my dad, I love people like Sean O'Casey and Juno and the Paycock, the Playboy of the Western World. I like the slight absurdity to all those. I love the bit in Juno and the Paycock, the wonderful thing that the guy who just comes in twice at the really most dramatic point. He comes in and says, "Would you like in Irish? Would you like to buy a sewing machine?" Is one of them. Just and it just kind of it's a fantastic moment. Yeah, so absurd. It
Did you
is.
did you enjoy Python?
I love Python, and of course, when we first had it, it was on late, so you had to start to watch it. And yeah, I was a big Python fan. I used to do a version of the Four Yorkshiremen when I had this theatre group, this Christian theatre group. We'd do a version of the Four Yorkshiremen. I used to do one that wasn't on the thing, the bookshop, if you can find the bookshop one, and I would be John Cleese, and the bloke wants to buy a book. Um, but he keep they're absurd, like Nicholas Nickleby, that's Nickelef, Nickleby, by Charles Dickens with a silent P. And the bloke finally gets to sell him. He says he says Olson's Book of British Birds, and he said he's got it. And then the bloke says, the one without the gannet. He said, why the gannet? He said, I hate gannets. All right. He rips it out of this book. There it is. And the bloke, and finally the bloke says, I've no, and they said, there's your book, buy it. And the bloke said, I haven't any money. And he said, I'll sit down. I can't read. brilliantly absurd.
Wonderful. Next question. Um, Now you mentioned your playwriting side. Do you tend to think of yourself, and I am asking you to sort of be a little revealing. Do you think of yourself more as a writer, as a playwright, as a poet, or
Everything I do is comes out of the same kind of place. I have a thing I go to where I write short stories, which is great because I like doing that. Um, I have written about 10 different novels, of which one kind of nearly got interest and then didn't. Um, so I had one of my plays. Got longlisted for quite a prestigious theatre in Manchester, the Royal Exchange, and then it didn't get on. So yeah, I think I don't kind of say which of those I am, and I'm beginning now. I'm slightly more retired. I'm beginning to like doing this one man show, putting on a bit of theatre. Um, yeah, this play that we're putting on is called one of them is called Tat. Involves two guys who are on a rubbish dump. They find a condom machine. The one guy doesn't want him to open it. They're looking for things. So they open it, expecting to find condoms. What are you going to do with condoms? And they find three old masters. And the one guy said, "Well, we're rich." And then the other guy pulled out a severed hand um, with a handcuff on it, and the other one says, "We're stuffed." So the question is, what are they going to do? Are the mafia going to get them because these are their paintings, or are they going to be incredibly rich? What do they do with them? And it's Ionescu and all that kind of stuff.
well, I think
Yeah.
for those of us who enjoy theater of the absurd, life is absurd enough. And I often remark that as a satirist or political humorist, there are things that for example, the Trump administration has done that I would never even imagine proposing because they're so absurd. And yet, we have this again and again. The imaginary evil enemy, the Antifa, which doesn't exist at all, but gets blamed for things left and right. It's really pretty amazing. Okay,
One
now,
of the thing, one of the things I've always seen plays as, and this comes out of the Christian when I was because I started the play thing as part of the drama that we were doing for the church, was about putting a mirror up to people. And in fact, at the end of my church time, it became a bit of a problem because I was putting up a mirror uh, to the church. Um,
yeah,
but one of the things about putting up a mirror and stuff is tricking people into thinking, getting people involved so that if you have something to say, they have invested before they realize what you've got to say. So there's a little poem that quite recent one, which you may have heard, which is the one that goes, my mother is, have you heard that one? My mother is waiting. And it goes, my mother is waiting. She's waiting for me. I didn't come home for my lunch and my tea. I didn't come back when I normally do. I didn't bring friends like I normally do. I didn't bring homework or little girl dreams. I'm not coming back, or so it seems. Because my mother is waiting and watching pass by an American bomber way up in the sky. So I like that little poem because I get people to invest in a child being missing. So even if they don't, even if they think, oh, it's fine what's going on in the Middle East, the bombing people and whatever, they get caught up in this, and then they realize that actually, and then it makes you question it. And I think art can do that. So that's kind of like something I've always had a kind of idea from.
absolutely, absolutely. Next question. There is a point in the artist's life where on the one hand you start, you're trying, you're attempting, you're thinking you want to try this, you want to try this, but at a certain point, after you've tried it enough, after you've presented enough, you really start to identify with that artist self. When did you think I'm an artist?
Oh, I mean, from when I was when I was at church, there was one point I was thinking of going off and being a missionary, and then I wanted to be a poet, and I wanted to use that for the kind of good of the world and whatever. And then I started writing books, I mean, the first books were kind of like very copy of C.S. Lewis type things, but and then yeah, I definitely wanted to be a writer. And I'd been teaching and I stopped teaching. So effectively, I was trying that. But what happened was that then I became involved in environmental stuff and worked with Friends of the Earth and various people. And that kind of then drew me into the whole thing about planning and road building and all kinds of stuff, uh, which then I got employed doing partly as well.
I had a
So it kind of battled with that. But it was always, yeah, I was always trying to, yeah, I was always working, it was always there. Um, and, but like m many kind of creative people, it never quite got there.
I had a very funny experience of, you may know I do cartoons as well as my writing. And I was at an environmental conference, and we were talking about water and water issues and herbicides and pollution of various types. And one of the people there from an organization, I'm going to leave their name out. She turned to me and said, "Geez, you know what I really need? We're starting a magazine, and we really need a cartoonist. My gosh, we could really use a cart. You wouldn't know any cartoonists, would you?" And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I do. I do cartooning myself, and I have I don't have any with me because I was taking notes and that sort of thing. But I'd be glad to show you some of my cartoons. This was during the Bush era, so as you can well imagine, between the black sites and the renditions and the torture and all that stuff, I said, but let me ask you before I send you anything, can you give me an idea? I mean, are you water pollution, air pollution, wildlife damage? I mean, what part of the pollution arena do you serve? And I'll try to send you something right along those lines. And she said, "Oh yeah, all of that. Oh, water, air, wildlife. Yeah, absolutely any of that. That'd be fantastic." And I had just drawn a series of cartoons about that big terrible oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and then they added in a dispersant which turned out to have really heavy biological impact to break up the oil. So I
Where's
have,
that? Where's that? I've never heard of that place. Gulf.
oh yeah, it was a really bad one. I think it was probably mid to late 90s.
No, no, it's the Gulf of Mexico. I never
Yeah.
knew it was called that. I thought it was called
Oh,
Gulf of
the Gulf of
America.
America. No, no, this
I
was
haven't got my poem with me about the Gulf of Mexico. I have a poem.
good.
Um, they're the place I'd like to go. It's called the Gulf of Mexico. It starts.
So,
It's a
so I
go.
drew this. I had drawn a cartoon, and of course, everyone was being assured that this terrible poisonous uh, chemical treatment, which disrupts lipid bonds, right? The bonds that hold all cells together, that it was okay. And listen, don't worry about it. So I drew a cartoon of two dolphins swimming. Their fins are ragged. It's exposed meat and bone, and there's a trail of blood coming off them. And one dolphin says to the other, "Hey, thank God this correction is not going to hurt us." And the companion drawing to that, this was when using wind power to generate electricity, which is much, much cleaner than pick one, fossil fuels anyway. It's a picture of a pelican looking back over its shoulder at a wind farm, and he's drenched in oil. There's the oil is just covering him. And he said, "Oh my God, those are such an eyesore," referring to the wind farm. And so I sent these cartoons to this young lady who was looking for an environmental cartoonist. I didn't hear anything back. So I gave her a call. I said, "Listen, I was asking, I want to know, you did you get my cartoons?" "Oh yeah, yeah, I got them." I said, "Well, you know, did you like them at all? I mean, it was dealing with water pollution, the Corexit in the Gulf of Mexico, and then also the wind farm issue, petroleum, wildlife, etc." I said, "You didn't like them at all?" And she said, "Oh, I liked them, but my God, they're so strong. They're they're really, they're a sledgehammer." And we were, I said, not to be belabored the point, but you know, political cartoons aren't done with a jeweler's saw. They're a sledgehammer. It's meant to catch your attention, to grab you and say, "Oh my God." But yeah, they couldn't use me.
Well, I mean, it was rainforest and things that got me inspired. But actually, what happened was I ended up doing stuff about whether you build roads through the countryside, and so it became much more closer to home. Um, and although you hear my political stuff, I had to be very even-handed because I, when I was campaigning on what became the M6 toll road for Friend of the Earth, I had to meet politicians of all kind of colours, and yeah. Uh,
Okay, next question. Now, when did you start performing poetry per se, rather than part of theater?
I was performing poetry when I was a teenager, so the poems that I was doing, um, when I was 15 and 16, I was performing before I did any kind of drama.
Okay.
So it was the other way round. But then I really stopped performing. And although I've never stopped writing poetry, um, I really began performing poetry again in about 2013, 14, that sort of time, um, when partly when my when I lost my father, when I lost my mother, and that kind of like was a point at which I got involved. But I wasn't really doing the cut. It was more. I wasn't doing. I was a bit sort of not. The idea of performance poetry wasn't what I was really um, into. Um, and yeah, but I kind of went on from there.
Okay. When you were a young man in school or college, were there teachers that were encouraging or not necessarily?
And I'm trying to I've actually just submitted a short manuscript, which I'm trying to get about my school days. Because when I was what would be about 9, um, because my parents thought I would fail the 11 plus, which is the way you got into a grammar school at the time. Um, and my sister had gone to a secondary modern and it had been a disaster. They put me into a school, a paid for school, an all boys school, and you had to pass an exam to get into it and whatever, which I did. But then they put me in the wrong year, literally a year older than I was.
Oh my.
Uh, yeah, and I tell the story that I was sat on a bench in my new uniform with and I got expensive books because being a fee-paying school, your parents bought the books, so they gave you the most expensive books, and my mum always complained about that. So I went to the school and I sat there and they went through the year, which I was meant to be the third year, and didn't call my name. And I'm sat on this bench. I have poem about it, about how at this moment I had this kind of 9-year-old. I knew that they had made a huge mistake. They go through all these kids, and I shouldn't be there. I hadn't passed the exam. It was all a big mistake, and I'd be left on a bench, and they'd say, "What are you doing?" And then they'd say, "Oh, it's a big mistake." I'd have to go home, go back to the old school, and um, you can imagine what it was like at 9 years old. But they didn't. They put me in the wrong year, and they claimed that I was on the cusp between the 2 years. I wasn't. I was way out, and I hadn't yet worked out that adults, if they make a mistake, rather than correct it, they will find a way around it. So I spent my whole school year, school time, too young, so I was bullied and picked on, bit in a world of my own. And at the other end, they said I wouldn't get into university because no university would have me because I was only 17. I wasn't old enough to go to university. In fact, they all offered me one. And I actually have my school, literally, I have a school report from what we would call O levels, going GCSE. So this is about when you're 16, before going into the sixth form. I actually have the report that they wrote saying it would probably be better if I didn't pass the exam and didn't go into the sixth form because I was too immature. I was only there because they put me in the wrong year. But I mean, it's a remarkable thing that my teacher actually said it would probably be better if I failed my exams. Yeah. So, yeah. So, and that kind of was the opposite to then I was going to this youth club because it's quite a way away, this school. It was a day school. It wasn't so I was going to this youth club and the Christianity and the religion. And in fact, it was that made me stand up to the bullies. Um, so yeah, so I'm trying to get this kind of book, short book, published by a local press, and I'm just waiting to see if I can get along with that.
Well, good
But
luck.
I've written several poems which are basically about my school day.
Okay,
Um,
next question. And this is one that requires a more philosophical response than maybe a pragmatic response. You know, there's two main schools of thought for writers. Number one is you write every day, you write as often as possible, to hell with inspiration, work as a craftsman, polish and polish and polish and polish. Now there's the other school, the other end of that spectrum is, oh no, no. Write when you're inspired. Don't don't try to pull things out of the air. Don't it's a waste of your time. It's not going to be happy. You're not going to be happy. You're going to be not satisfied. So in that spectrum from write every day, practice your craft, whether you're inspired or not, to strictly working and when you're inspired, where do you fall in that spectrum?
well, I mean, I write poems a lot. Um, and I kind of fit, I think, I don't know if you know Norman McCaig, the Scottish poet,
No, I
but
don't.
he used to say, well, if you look him up, he's a wonderful poet. But he used to write bucket loads, and a whole load of it ended up in the bin, which I write bucket loads. I don't actually put it in the bin, but so there's a lot that I'll be writing poems quite a lot. And out of those will come some which are good and some which I do again and again and some which I maybe only do a bit. So the idea of I don't really have dry periods where I don't write anything like that. Um, when I was writing novels, I don't plan those out. So all my novels started with me at the beginning. Um, and as a result, I have a large amount of uh, two chapters of something I wrote with an idea that it would go somewhere and then couldn't do it. I have one novel that's been in my head probably for 20 years and I will never write. but I kind of know about it. And then, so with the novel writing, yeah, they went through a huge number of drafts, and the plays obviously were often redrafted and worked on. Um, the poems are just, I'm always doing it. And I don't really distinguish between the comic and the serious. I don't, if I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I think of something, I'll write it, and it might be a stupid thing like, why am I looking at the wall? Or it might be, kind of like something quite serious about the world. So it can go any kind of way.
Okay, thank you. Next, and I think I can probably pretty much guess it, but I want to ask, are there topics that you find yourself drawn to again and again?
Uh, well, obviously, I write a large number of poems in praise of Donald Trump, which I obviously can't do it. It's most annoying because I go to these open mics and I'm just dying to do a poem about how wonderful Donald Trump is, and I can't do it. But apart from
So you're
that,
a fantasist,
apart from that, um, and yeah, I mean the poems about my childhood, about my school. There are those. There are poems about religion. I have a whole load of sonnets based on bits of the Bible, which I kind of came back to, um, usually finding something different in them. I've got one of those here called The Cool of the Evening, which you can hear now or later.
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 Okay, I
I'll
want to
put
get
that
through
one.
my.
I'll
I
put
was
that
gonna
one
say.
in reserve. But
Oh,
yeah, and then there's kind of like the political things. Um, uh, I've been writing a lot about Palestine and all that has kind of like been quite a thing. I wrote one the other day about uh, which kind of brings things together. A woman called Mona Khalil, who looked after turtles in southern Lebanon and was killed by
oh
Israeli
yeah,
raiders.
yeah.
Um, and I kind of, that. Um, so yeah, so things like that will get to me. Um, sometimes there's something that will get and on the political side, there'll be a thing I think I ought to write about.
Hmm.
And I just can't. When we had this thing, I don't know if you heard about it when they were and they're still putting all these flags around the country to kind of like intimidate migrants, and or it was said to be patriotic, but it was just a way of a bit like happened in Northern Ireland with the flags. And I spent ages trying to write a flag poem, thinking I ought to write a flag poem, and in the end, in the middle of the night, I came up with too many flags on lampposts, too few brains behind them. And I do that, perform it, and it gets a huge, because people are expecting a big, long thing. Um,
Thank you.
I also love short poems. Um, I was at a thing, I was at a political poetry event called Poems Against Racism, and there is the other day, and people feel they have to write 3 minutes of a thing when actually maybe you've only got, that says everything I want to say about the flags. So I like to do short poems as well as long ones.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, the next question is, uh, do you feel that poets or writers in general have a responsibility to address contemporary societal issues, whether it be war and peace or injustice or racism or whatever? Is that our job, or is that just one of the things, one topic we might pick?
Um, I don't think we are obliged to do it. There are writers that I love who did not write politically, or did not address contemporary things. Um, I like writers who have got something underneath them to say. So, I still love C.S. Lewis. Um, because I love children's books, and well, some of my novels are children's books. So I love the character who Eustace, who's redeemed, who's a horrible and becomes better because he's turned into a dragon. And I think he's a fantastic character because it says something to me. And I always contrast it with the fat boy in J.K. Rowling, who is just there to be the butt of Harry Potter, and the contrast. So I want characters that have something to say and important to me. It can be internal, it can be political, um, and I think some of them, and even and books that don't necessarily have a direct political thing, but say something about our society. I think can be very good.
I've read a Twain book, Sam Clemens, a couple months back, Innocents Abroad. And even though it's really essentially a travelogue about his experience on this trip, but he manages quite a bit of social analysis, uh, describing the boorish behavior of these yahoos from America touring the Middle East and scratching their names in marble temples and grabbing fragments of pillars and uh, it
Yeah,
and it's a very interesting piece. I enjoyed it tremendously.
yeah. I read Mark Twain's short stories a while back, and the one that really got me was the one, I don't know if you know it, the one where the bloke is sold a lightning conductor, and he
No,
gets it's a wonderful. It's about, yeah, it's so contemporary about the kind of cons that you get online now. But this bloke comes along, said, neighbour, you might be struck by lightning, and he sells him a lightning conductor, and then he sells him more and more lightning conductors until the whole house is covered in like, I can't remember how it ends, but it's an incredibly uh, uh brilliant.
I'll have
Because
to
he
look.
says it's my neighbour. It's kind of like got that kind of down home American kind of thing about this guy. Your neighbor from the next village must be wonderfully good, and he isn't. Um, but it is so like the way people online will draw people in. Yeah, but he was a great satirist, and of course there are satirists going back to the famous Swift satire
Oh yeah,
about a whatnot proposal, which is, the problem to the Irish is that they
right,
should.
right, right. A modest proposal. Yeah,
A modest, that's the one.
yeah.
Um, but yes, so yeah,
Okay, next question, sir. Um, if a young person came up to you and said, I'm thinking about doing some writing. I really feel compelled to be a poet. Is poetry worthwhile? Is it important enough to spend my life on? Is it really ultimately worthwhile? What do you think?
yes and no. I mean, there's an awful lot of poets, an awful lot of poetry in the world, and you shouldn't, you poets tend to think that they have written the 10 lines that are the most wonderful line since Shakespeare. Um, you might write a novel which will be remembered for, you might write 1984, or you know, or you might write Under Milk Wood, which will be remembered. Um, poems, even great poets are, kind of like small things. Um, but very important.
Okay, thank you.
So I mean, I couldn't not do it. I
Right.
couldn't not write poetry.
That's the best excuse in my book. I
Yeah,
don't, I couldn't not write poetry.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next question. What makes a good poet?
Well, obviously, all the people I see online on Zoom, they're all wonderful, and I've never said a bad word about any of them behind their back. Um, I think having a story to tell, um, I think the use of language, um, I think having a thing that is contained, um, and unfortunately, people who have a beef, if you like, and it can be a righteous beef, something like, a political beef, or about sexuality or whatever. They can end up writing poor poetry because they're actually writing just about the beef, and they think it must be good because I've said something that is right on or true. And I don't think that's true. I mean, Philip Larkin, who was quite a horror, you know, um, was kind of like had very poor views on quite a lot of things. Was a great poet because he just knew how to put wonderful words like, the trees are coming into leaf like the trees are coming into leaf like something almost being said is a brilliant evocation. And, in the end, poetry is about that evocation of something. Um,
Next question, sir. We're coming down the end.
yeah,
There are poets that tell a story, and there are poets that they construct a collection of metaphors that
mm.
are interesting, inspiring, beautiful, but don't really tell a story. How do you feel? How important is narrative to poetry?
um, it depends. I mean, I have a bit of a beef about that whole thing where T.S. Eliot was writing poems that you had to need a thesaurus to work the way through. And there were poets after that who kind of followed through with that. And, it had to be difficult and hard. Um, and sometimes poets have produced language which is where they're kind of desperately trying to find a metaphor, and it's I there was one I can't remember the exact thing, but there was a poet in it, and this woman was in a tea room, and she looks at her hand and she sees the skeleton in it, and I ended up writing a satirical poem about it because I just sat there and it was such an absurd image. Uh, but So I think people can just try. People just sometimes just try too hard. But I do think, it is about. I like to a poem that you do out loud gives it life, and uh, so yeah, I think it kind of it when you see it, don't you?
Well, I'm thinking
It's-
of a few poets of my acquaintance tend to write what I call pretty music poems, where it's a lovely set of metaphors, but it doesn't
Yeah,
really, there's no from A to B. And for
yeah,
me personally, I enjoy that narrative arc. I enjoy that we start here, we go through this passage, then we get to there. And that to me takes takes poetry to a place beyond foam. Not
yeah,
that foam is bad, but it's just for me, I
I'm
like
not
to go someplace with it.
I'm not great on the kind of thing that they call beat poetry, and you'll get somebody who will read a poem which kind of has a load of they kind of doesn't tell you anything about anything, but sort of goes, it sort of takes you through a dreamy escape of various uh, things that are going on and whatever, and you never quite grasp it. Um, I don't necessarily uh, get that.
Yeah, that
I
kind of
did,
I think of that as the cartoon version of poetry. Somebody
yeah,
standing there saying a bunch of words that are
yeah,
interesting in themselves, but they don't tell you something. Okay,
yeah.
final question, sir. Is there something on your writing desk right now?
Um, well, I'm not at my writing desk, but the certainly there's a slam. There's a little trophy that I won at a slam in Staffordshire, which I kind of like. Um, there's there's a kind of papier-mâché dinosaur-y type thing. There's a Snoopy mug with pens in, which I think actually belongs to my wife. But so yeah, it's a bit cluttered up my desk. Um, and the text that says how to something like how to make the ordinary wonderful or something like that, which is slightly banal, but uh, yeah, it's kind of so yeah.
Well,
Um,
thank you so much. That was a wonderful excursion into the mind and the heart of Gerald. And I was wondering, sir, if you'd like to read some of your poetry.
yeah, sorry, I've given you some already. I wasn't. So I'll start with. I told you about the sonnets that I wrote for going back to the Bible. You see, so I kind of like this took the story and trying to. This was one I did quite recently called "The Cool of the Evening." It's a bit rude. I hope you'll be all right with that, Richard. This naked man and this naked woman take their place in the cool of the evening. His silliness is lost on their straight faces. Her sex is unnoticed in the fig leaf light. Shadows grow on the blushing hyenas, the lurid lions, the giraffes who see above everything, the god on his cloud machine whose son is at his side, both with beards. Each know that what the couple do not. Each know that despite pain, despite disappointment, there is a moment coming, a moment that's fucking brilliant, if you'll pardon my English. It is the meerkats, of course, cute as they look on a postcard, who are egging the serpent on. So I didn't warn you there was a swear word in that.
Oh, that's
Is
quite all right. Quite all right. This is a free speech zone, my friend.
it? So yeah, you were asking for something absurd,
Yeah, always
and
my home turf.
I guess therefore you like a poem about 17 parrots. We're still on kind of animals.
Yeah, sure.
17 parrots in a car, no one knows why they are, nobody knows if they'll melt, none are wearing safety belts. 18 silverback gorillas resting their arms on Grecian pillars, none of them have a mobile phones with jingly jangly ringing tones. 16 lions in silhouettes eating 16 lion vets, being quite unsympathetic. It's alive and with no being quite unsympathetic, it's alive and with no anaesthetic. 14 wandering wildebeest flatulent from farting feasts, reading novels in translation, seemingly deep in contemplation. 15 vultures wearing coats, watching films and making notes, studying for their degrees, look out for their knobbly knees. 13 hippopotami basking under a cloudless sky, sticking up their haggard hoofs, solving mathematical proofs. 19 nitwits on safari drank too much dry Campari, Who knows what they'll next invent or where their inhibitions went? Surely they're a pitiful bunch who don't deserve to be a crocodile's lunch. The bad joke's coming. Still, if you're feeling cruel and meaner, join the 21 laughing hyenas. Hyenas got in twice there. Two
Nicely
poems,
done. Nicely done.
both with hyenas. Um,
Well,
yeah,
that's a children's book for sure, if I've ever seen one.
yeah. So, do you want me to do a political one here? A bit of a
Absolutely.
political.
Whatever you like.
So, I don't know if you've been following the thing about Palestine action in the UK, or is
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I
Yeah.
have. How dare
But
they have an opinion?
yeah, well, the appeal court decision, Baroness Carr, they've just been they've been re-banned. And she said it's a fundamental mistake to overlook the fact that Palestine action overtly promotes unlawful violence amounting to terrorism. Is it true? Or it's what they say. And then it was this bit. It is not as claimed a direct action civil disobedience protest group like the suffragettes operating transparently in the open. So this was news to me, and I wrote this little poem. It's nice to discover that the suffragettes were less disruptive than I thought.
My
That when,
gosh. I'm sorry,
that
go
when,
ahead.
that when they burnt public buildings, chained themselves to railings, and dived in front of the king's horse, they considered carefully the possibility that the king's horse's rider might be hurt and put in safety measures to ensure that didn't happen. And that all the time they didn't evade capture or keep their activities secret, but rang up the police to make sure they knew. And now I am aware that their main activity was cake making, and those neatly pressed badges and ladylike jewels in purple, white, and green. I can rest easy that the British way of life is safe, and all that political stuff is something to be laughed off in. Is something to be laughed off in sitting rooms where you and I sit silently.
I just was hearing some more information today about it that while the charges were almost trivial, requiring a very modest punishment, ultimately, after the should we say the charges were laid, later the judge added on this terrorist factor, and then suddenly they're going to they'll be in jail for years for simply differing on an opinion about Israel.
Well, they weren't quite trivial because there was one of the people attacked someone, so they weren't trivial, but they were accused. They weren't charged with terrorism. Terrorism was added on at the
That
sentencing,
yeah, that point that's the
and,
point. Yeah.
and then that fed into the appeal court on the banning of Palestine action. So yes, it was all a bit. And you also you said you want to hear my poems in praise of Donald Trump because
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I have a
uh,
strong stomach.
he's sitting in the White House and he's looking very fat. He's sitting in the White House. What do you think of that? Guzzling on donuts as he starts another war, wondering what dead children are actually for. Someone's come to visit, so he'll get his little kick saying something nasty, making them feel sick. Keeping up the menace of that threatening MAGA hat as he's sitting in the White House like he wants to stroke a cat.
Wow, nicely done.
That's
Nicely
that's
done. Go ahead,
that's
do another one, and then I'll share one of my recent Trump poems.
well. Okay. Before I'll do a slightly longer one because
Yeah.
I've tended to do the short ones. So And this is quite a serious one. This is going to be quite a yeah. As I talk back about my past and about um going to church and stuff, and one of the things, and I'll mention it here so you can see it, is that on my hand, this poem is about, I have a scar. You can see there, and that came about when I was 4. My earliest memory is tripping over a milk bottle and cutting my hand open. So I can be serious about things, and this poem is called Scar Tissue. And it's about that, and yeah, sort of followed it through. On my right hand, I have a scar, which I forget from time to time. I call it the snake, because if you cross my palm with silver, it hisses, and you should never stare too long. It was in Linton that I ran towards the ice cream of original sin, tripped over the milk bottle of God's command, lost my innocence to a hospital visit when I was 4. I was under fire before my grandmother's shortbread and a visit to Belfast when the troubles all kicked off, before my first encounter with a tank. In Linton, I have one recollection, a bowl, those thin plastic types where the colour drains into scratch marks. My blood, as I recall, was not red like a bus, but scarlet like Judas's. According to my wife, a tale I've never heard, my father took me to the hospital without my mother knowing. So she turned up at the corner shop, keyless and clueless, while I was stitched in a shadowy waiting room. No ice creams were ever obtained. It was a lot like that on holidays. On Britas Beach in the Dublin Pale, a thorn, an inch perhaps, lodged in my soul. Up in Newcastle, my father made me put my foot up, pushed the flesh in until he could wrench the bugger out. And how I screamed. You'd have screamed too, like you'd been waiting for your saviour. For I was almost redeemed by then. People asked if I'd come to the Lord, and it's good to please, so I stood up and testified, and they prayed for me, and everyone was happy. And I was hardly troubled, hardly a fraud, believing the lie that was my virtue. Now, when God and serpent seem equally unimportant, I turn to that scar. It's 50 years old and more. I no longer faint at blood, no longer faint at needles or sharp knives. Yet when I say a word awry, it is like that first falling over, like my reflection in a bucket of blood. No stigmata, you see, the scar, but a snake healed over. Cold remnant to be marvelled at during my post-mortem.
Lovely,
So
lovely.
that is a poem about the scar on my hand, and it covers quite a lot. My parents weren't religious, so that was but yeah, yeah, and I was terrified of, well, I wasn't terrified of needles, but I would blank out at them, and I think it goes back to this. So that yeah, and that was a.
Well, let me share one of my Trump poems with you.
I hope it's going to say nice things about him because there's been
Oh,
far too much. And that Vance bloke, I mean, he is a genius. I can't say enough about him. Texas, the man of peace. I'm surprised even in the Old Testament somewhere, And yeah, all that lot. I love them. Love every one of them. As you know.
as I know. Well, this is you know, before we had so many successful wars with Iran, uh, he was philosophically considering how he might help the good people of Iran. And he announced that what would be very wise of them would be for them to select him as their next mullah. So this is a treatment on that. It's called the Mullah Trump's Sacred Vote. His vast training in Sharia law guides his vision ever flawless, sanctifying all he saw, even last night's McDonald's burger stuck down there, semi-digested, awaiting perhaps an incision or the rewriting of our historical revision. Inside his rugged, overly distended, fluid, retentive orange craw, we know what he was eating, we know what we saw, and yet we can't forget his fluency in Farsi will stand him in good stead as it leaks out with the drool from the wound in the rear of the ear of his head. No doubt he will play a pivotal, if not pitiable, role, this man of the hour, drooling and scowling, just dripping in gold-plated power, just the sort of worldly power he alone can bring in this so critical hour. Over the years, his intimate and close contact with Sharia Muslims prepared him, as did his hours spent in silent meditation, intense and pensive in those ancient cloistered halls in the great Islamic universities, known to have enhanced his long vaunted respect for diversity. His studies have enhanced his ability to conduct light, tightly reasoned, and well-seasoned debates in the finest Islamic tradition. Thus, we see his holy crusade to free Islamic tradition from the solicitation and blandishments of the jaded and decadent Western establishment. Prepared by his studious and contemplative nature, he pauses to don the religious vestments while preparing to quote from the current banking of today's Islamic gold investments, known to be unimpeachable, beyond the corruptive influence so obviously reachable. Scholars from Asia, Africa, and India, too, Muslims from the steppes, and monks from Korea, Japan, and Kalamazoo. His years immersed in Islamic studies have made him over until he, thoughtful, deeply contemplative, and ready, or was it instead the hours spent researching the corridors and halls of Miss Teen USA? Anyway, you see, as he is ready, come what may, hey, little honey, out of my way, even-handed and compassionate as he nods and bows at the meetings, all the while spinning and clicking furiously his criminal castanets, is his Morse code, his fifth language that we know of, will ultimately reveal his meaning, or just that his Parkinson is now no more concealing.
Oh dear. And he would have been so good if he could have been run Iran.
Absolutely. Pump ass, self-important. He has all the trappings of a religious leader. I really think so.
Mm.
And please, more Gerald Kells, please.
So, you're talking about getting old and Parkinson's and things, and I just had this one in front of me, which I wrote the other day, called Hazel. And the guy who comes to some of our poetry events who's got Parkinson's, and there's been a deterioration. And it inspired me to write this poem, not just about him, but it's called Hansel and. When I go into the forest and search for a word, a bright yellow one or blue, I find there are too many trees these days and too many shadows behind them. The words are still in there, like the ones for the things that fall off chestnut trees. It'll come to me in a minute. But I can't quite find them, and the night is closing in, and I've forgotten the breadcrumbs and whoever it was I came in with. Only my mother's face stays present, and that cottage, the green one, which I'm going back to later. Aren't I? Well, why am I telling you all this? You're not a woodcutter. You're that other thing, the wand and a pointy hat thing. Can I go back now, please? I know you're not my sister. I know you're just pretending. That's called Hansel and.
Wow.
That was a bit more
Poignant.
serious.
Poignant, yeah.
Let's do it quickly. Let's do. I had Let's do this little one here. The sunshine in the lemon, and I normally have a lemon to do this if I do it live. I can't. There was some prompt that led to this, but I can't remember it now. If I could wring the sunshine from this lemon, it could make the whole world shine. Glossier the polished kiss, sweet as all the promises of lovers, tangier the dream plucked from a tree. If I could wring the sunshine from this lemon, and you could accept it like the sunshine in me. That
Very
was a
nice. Very nice.
little short one. And what am I got? I've got something. Oh yeah, there was to about age. This is about you know Nick Lovell, don't you?
Yeah.
From yeah, because he works in and he was when I read this, he said, oh, you know, we're getting more and more people who are punks now coming in. So this is called Haven't You Slippers? What are you doing? Haven't you slippers? Don't you know you're missing Bargain Hunt? Bargain Hunt is a midday thing in Britain. Don't you know you're missing Bargain Hunt? It's time you accepted half-cold semolina and the view from your window, endless rain. What are you doing? Striped pyjamas are what's required from Marks and Spencer's. Can't you concentrate on visiting the doctors, bowel movements, and your 4 grandchildren? Why won't you realise your time is over? The dancing, singing, whirling turbines now are chugging, wheezing geriatric. At least forget where you've put your keys. Don't you know, or have you forgotten? You vowed you'd never be this embarrassing. I'm telling you flatly, stop the pogoing, turn down the clash before there's complaints. So that was, yeah, haven't you slippers? That was, yeah, that was about.
Very nice.
um, and I know.
You want to do one big one and we'll close it?
You want me to do a big one? Do you want me to do? I'll do you a little bit of a story, shall I?
Sure, sure.
So this is one I did quite recently, and I've done this. The various story things I do with prompts. So this is called The Webs We Weave, and it's a kind of slightly political thing. It keeps trying to want to take over the whole of the screen, which is why I'm looking very oddly at the screen. It keeps, yeah, I've got it up in front. The Webs We Weave. And this is kind of halfway between poetry, story writing, and drama. I think actually, I would just say before drama is very useful for both story writing and poetry because it makes you talk. Good morning. Please take a seat. That's all right. Any seat will do. If you can just confirm your name. Mr. Fly will do. I don't need your first name and your address. Yeah, I know it's one of our webs and we have all the information on our computer screen, but if you could just... Thank you. Now, what seems to be the problem? You're trapped. I know you're trapped. You're in one of our webs. Did you do something to upset us? I'm sorry, Mr. Fly, but you cannot be in our web simply because we put it there to trap you. Now, you must have done something to upset us. Now, I don't have to prove you've upset us. I don't have to prove you deserve to be in our web. I don't have to prove anything. I'm happy to help if I can, but you are in our web through your own fault. Now, if we can establish the nature of your problem, I can see if I can help. or if you're just stuck, and must accept that you shouldn't have got into our net in the first place. An example. I can give you an example. Did you, for an example, accuse us of being spiders? Did you collect food scraps and refuse to give us half? Have you posted on social media that there are sticky webs being put up to trap flies and told other flies to be wary of spiders in the vicinity? Are you an illegal fly who only lived in our country because of global warming and should be deported back to where you came from? Do you owe money to wasps? No use shaking your head. We don't act in an arbitrary fashion. We have a set of moral codes. You can see them pinned up on the board behind me. 1. Never catch civilian flies. 2. Put notices on all our webs to advise that they are there. 3. Advise flies of their rights if they accidentally get trapped in one of our nets. No, we stick religiously to these rules, and if you're suggesting we didn't do so in your case, then you are clearly wrong, because that would be against our ethos and our support for ethical values as set down in our charter. Moreover, it could never be proven, even if I were to set up an official investigation as you suggest, which I don't propose to do, because we would never. There's no use smirking. No, we wouldn't. Which brings me back to you, Mr. Fly. What exactly have you done? And why are you making a complaint? You do understand that if you make an unjustified complaint, I can take further action against you for making that complaint. Yes, I'm quite sure. Now, I'd like to help you. No, I'm not going to remove the sticky stuff from around your neck. Yes, I'm afraid your 5 minutes is up and I have other victims, customers to deal with. If you could close the door when you leave. Oh, you can't because of the sticky stuff round your neck. Then I'll have to eat you while I'm filling in the paperwork. Mr. Fly agreed to withdraw his complaint. Yum. Mr. Fly didn't struggle. Next, name. My, 300 flies in one day. I am a busy spider.
Nice.
So that's the sort of, one of the ones I do, the kind of like, and not all the stories are political, but yeah, that's my kind of.
Well, do you want to do one more?
Sorry, you want me to do one? But let me just see what I've got. Oh, do you want something humorous to finish with?
Sure, sure. That sounds good.
Oh dear, no, actually, I didn't realize I got this here. You'll like this one.
Thank you.
The one I was talking about earlier, I didn't realize I brought it up. And you may censor me in the middle if you find it too upsetting.
No, not at all.
There's a place I want to go. It's called the Gulf of Mexico. It's a place where no one lies, where you can question wheres and whys, where friends are friends and that's a fact, no stabbing allies in the back, where all are welcome, not just those with brown and sycophantic nose, where Greenland's famous icy shores are free of red land grabbing claws, where honest people keep their jobs, not lose them to wealth grabbing yobs, where speech is kind as well as free and no one's kicked out brutally, where our bravest leaders are not conflated with dictators who are rightly hated for genocide, invasions, steals and bloody, brutal property deals, where a president is not a king and no one gives him one damn thing. Yes, they're the place I want to go. It's still called the Gulf of Mexico.
Very nice.
I didn't realize I had that. I thought I've got it here. I can't do it for you, and there it is.
Sir, thank you so very much for sharing some time with us. I've
It's been
always
great.
appreciated your sense of humor. Any last words you want to share with our listeners?
No, it's been great, and I want to say how wonderful it's been, how wonderful Donald Trump is, how much his administration is great, how much he's making America great again. Everybody on the world stage thinks he's wonderful, and they've said, that Europeans want him. I want him to govern. I really wish he would now, and then he could come and govern Britain, and hopefully we could put him in a tiny little box about that
There
big.
you go. Thanks again, Gerald. It's been a real pleasure. You have a good day, brother, and good night to you in
Take
the
care.
UK.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.